There are two basic methods for catching Great Lakes steelhead: dead drifting and swinging the fly. Although swinging the fly is thought by most to be more fun and closer to the essence of fly fishing, dead drifting a fly is often the most effective and is the best way to start if you just want to catch a steelhead on the fly. There are many different ways to get a dead drift, which is bringing your fly to the fish instead of a fish chasing the fly. Some steelhead are more aggressive than others, but the majority of the fish are down in their lies picking things from the current just as smaller trout do. And as in trout fishing, any drag on the fly may turn these fish off, so your fly has to tumble in the current like natural food. And also like trout fishing, we can do this either by suspending flies from an indicator or by fishing them on a tight line with a direct line from the rod tip to the flies. On a recent steelhead trip, Mark Melnick and I both dead drifted a combination of egg flies and white zonker patterns. Although we used exactly the same flies, we used different techniques to get them down to the fish. And we caught about an equal number of fish when we were able to get good drifts. Here Mark and I explain the difference in our techniques.
As you can see, Tom is using a very different technique for targeting these steelhead than I am. He's tight lining with a sighter, which means that he's in direct contact with his fly and the weight that he has to get his fly down to the bottom. I'm using an indicator, which is not unlike a bobber, which shows what's going on beneath the surface for me, but I don't directly feel what Tom feels. So it's two very different ways of presenting eggs and nymphs, and they're both very effective in their own right. You know what? To each his own. Tom loves the sensitivity of being able to feel those fish take or to feel the bottom, and I like the action of seeing the bobber go down, the indicator go down, and setting the hook on these fantastic Great Lakes steelhead.
So what I'm doing is called tight lining or high sticking. And what I'm doing is I'm using a very thin line, and it's all leader. I really only have the leader outside of the tip of my rod. So you plunk the flies down, whether it's weighted flies or a split shot, they go right to the bottom. That thin line that they're connected to doesn't have any resistance, and it cuts through the current, gets right to the bottom. Then you tighten up a little bit and just try to lead those flies down through the pockets. It's dead drift, and you got just a little bit of tension on it so that you can feel every bump on the bottom and maybe a little bit more solid pull that might be a fish. Whoop. Bye-bye, buddy. Yeah, I just re-rigged and maybe something about the way I put the weight on there. I lengthened my tippet a little bit. It could have been a lot of things. With this high sticking, you want to have a lot of tippet below that sighter. And I didn't have as much tippet on before, and that allows me to get that, the tippet is going to sink better than anything because it's thinner. So the more tippet you have on there, the quicker your fly is going to get down with less weight. Rigging for tightline steelhead is very straightforward. You tie about a 2-foot section of colored cider material to the end of a 9-foot 0x leader, add a swivel to the end of the cider, and tie a fluorocarbon tippet to the swivel. Your tippet might be anywhere from 2 feet to 5 feet, depending on the depth. You can fish a single fly on the end of this, or tandem flies where legal. Split shot can be placed above the flies or between them to get added depth. There are many ways to set up an indicator rig, but here, Jeff Blood details exactly how he sets up his indicator rig. Show us how you rig an indicator for steelhead, indicator rig, and then show how to adjust it, because I know, myself included, I get lazy, and everybody gets lazy, and you don't adjust your indicator height or your weight, and then you're not bouncing bottom or you're not at the correct positioning. So how do you start this indicator rig?
I'd be glad to show you how, Tom.
Okay.
And that is probably one of the most important things, is to adjust for the conditions that you're standing over.
Right.
And as you move up and down the stream, it changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or from day to day, your weather system changes. You get more water. I like to use a egg-shaped indicator. For me, it just floats better. It's got good aerodynamics for casting, and I like mine in line. So what I mean by that is I'll show you as I put it on.
So you're starting with just a 9-foot 3X trout leader, right? Standard
9-foot 3X, 9 or 10 feet.
Okay.
What I find is that seems just to be the optimum length for at least Lake Erie steelhead fishing, and probably all of the Great Lakes from my experience. But anyway, I just bend the line over, and I feed it through.
Bend the leader over.
The leader, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yep.
And feed it through.
Right.
And now you got a loop sticking through there, and then you take your tag end and feed it through that loop, and just pull the whole system all the way through, and then you tighten down. Now what that allows you to do
so that doesn't slide. It locks
if you notice,
in
it's
place.
locked in, and it's when I say in line, you can see how it's proportioned all the way around. So it's not a pendulum flopping around or whatever.
Yep.
And I just find that works better, especially in the wind.
Okay.
Now, if I want to adjust that, I just back it off.
Back off.
Well, I'm just pulling the line through, and then I just draw it down, and now you can see I've moved that down a foot.
Okay.
And I can move it all the way down.
You want to bring it back up? It's just
I can move it all the way down the system.
Okay.
Now, often what I do is I'll put a swivel right where the tippet material starts on your leader.
Okay.
And the reason I do that, a couple of things. In the fall of the year when all those leaves are in the system, and you hook a leaf and the wind blows it and you get a helicopter effect and it just twists your line. This makes it go away. The other side of it is when you're tying in your tippet material, it's a better junction, especially if it's fluorocarbon and you have a nylon leader.
Okay, so you start with a standard nylon leader and then fluorocarbon tippet.
And fluorocarbon tippet.
Okay.
And that's what I fish.
So straight 3X off the swivel.
3X. Okay. And then I go to my fly, and I use a tandem rig.
Okay.
And I use a improved clinch to this fly.
Okay.
And so there's a system. And then
so there's an egg fly at the end of the tippet, and then below that you have what?
I have a white zonker.
Yeah. With how much tippet? Same 3X.
I do the same 3X.
Okay. Because people are going to ask these
and
questions.
I do about
they want to know exactly what you got.
2.5 to 3 feet.
Okay.
Okay. And I know that's longer than what people would think it should be, but that's what I've learned. It catches fish. Everybody wants to know why. I'm not really sure why. It just catches more fish. Okay.
Good enough for me.
So on my split shot, I carry 3 different sizes, B, BB, and 3/0. And what I find is I can, on almost every system, accomplish a lot. So this is a BB right here.
Okay.
And I'll put it about 14 inches above. Then I'll add 2, 3, 4 of those, or I'll put a 3/0 on. Now, why are you doing that? And here's
how far? That's about like 8 inches from your.
That's 9 inches right there. So it's about 12 inches right there.
From
I'll vary it, anywhere from 10 to 14 inches. Now, probably the biggest mistake most people do is they break off. They continue to break off. And as they're doing that, let's just say you're losing both rigs, you're probably losing 2 or 3 inches every time you tie a fly.
Right.
And all of a sudden now they're down to 7 feet or 8 feet of tippet.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you can't catch fish with that, but it really impacts it. So
the more fine fluorocarbon you got in the water column, the less resistance
and that length,
against that
there's
tippet.
something about that length that just seems to be magical. So, eventually cut it baback out, put a new piece of tippet material in.
Tie 2 flies on.
Tie 2 flies on and get back to it.
Yeah.
Your split shot is, you're measuring the variables, which are the depth, the speed of the water.
Right.
And so what you want to do is you want it to bounce, but you don't want it to drop and hang up.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling the bottom, the likelihood that you're down on the bottom where the fish normally are is not very good.
So if your strike indicator isn't twitching every once in a while, you're not deep enough.
Well, the reality is it is a bobber.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, it is
but
a bobber.
we fly fishermen call it a strike indicator,
I call it a bobber.
and it is.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's very effective. And so in my fishing, I also will high stick with my indicator on my line. People say you can't do it, and I say, why not? Okay, so often what I'm doing, and it has to do with your distance, you understand this. When you're high sticking, it's normally off the pendulum of your rod tip, maybe a little farther out, and you're letting it come down through. But if you have to cast 30 or 40 feet across the stream, it's very hard to high stick and be accurate over there to do it. This gives you that flexibility. So I can flip it over there, if it's in a place where I can't wade into it to get there to high stick.
So you can mend and let
I
your
can
indicator.
mend it and do it, and it just gives me more flexibility.
So when do you adjust your indicator? What indications are there that I should make my indicator closer to the flies and the weight or farther away?
So this is probably the least adjustment that I will do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But most of the time I'll go deeper. Okay. When I'm not seeing the tick of the line, and I'll pull it all the way up close to the top, within about 2 or 3 inches of the leader. But there are times when I think the water's really slow and the tail out of a pool. You cast it out. If the leader's too long, your indicator's going, but it hasn't straightened your leader out yet so that you actually see the detection. So if you shorten it down, the detection will happen quicker, and especially when they're in a tail out. That's a good place to do it.
So you're gonna probably adjust your weight before you adjust your indicator height?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the first line of defense is
The first
adding a
thing I
split
do
shot or
in
taking
steelhead
off a split
fishing
shot
is-
if you're hanging up too much.
If my length is correct, that's the first variable before I even change my flies.
Okay.
Whether you use an indicator or tightline system, you will hook the bottom and you will lose a pile of flies. No way around it.